So that gentleman went on to get to the semifinals of Britain's Got Talent. Part of the reason why I think that's so moving, and that experience was so moving, not just for him, but for the people watching him, is because it was so unexpected. It was an unexpected gift. It was a second chance at something that he'd given up on, and then it was given to him by people who loved him and who saw something in him that wanted to say, hey, you deserve this opportunity, you deserve this second chance. Sometimes it's sweeter to get something when it was already taken from you, and then you're given it back again. And that sweetness of having something given back when you thought it was gone makes it all the sweeter. My name is Annetta. I am a member of the teaching team here at the Gathering House. You can probably tell that I'm a little under the weather today, so we're going to get through this together. Hopefully my voice is going to hold out for the sermon, but I'm just really blessed to be here today. As many of you probably know, this will be my last time preaching here at the Gathering House for the foreseeable future, because my husband and I will be moving across the country here in the next month or so. So I'm just really blessed to be here today and to be able to deliver this message, whatever comes out. So I'm just going to start off by praying, and then we'll get into the text. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you for the things that you did to make this moment come together. I just ask that the message that you've given to me, that it would come through clearly, and that your word being preached, that it would fall on soil that's ready to hear it, that you would just prepare every heart here, and that your word would just that it would just grow something beautiful, and that it wouldn't be me speaking, but it would be you. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, so we're going to be going over Isaiah 40 today. Rob, when he asked me to be speaking today, he said, just say anything. And I hate it when people say that, because it's like when you're given a wall and you're like, paint anything you want. You're like, well, it'd be nice if I had some guidance. So as I was really thinking about, okay, what would be the thing that I would want to say one last time at the Gathering House? And I really felt like the thing I wanted to leave with was a word of encouragement. That whatever it was, that it would be something that would be encouraging, that would be able to be something that would be able to sit and be carried forward, just as a memory of God being with you, and of him putting something inside of you that you'd be able to remember in the good and the bad times. And Isaiah 40 to me is one of those passages that is one of the more encouraging passages in the Bible. Many people will remember the last verse of it, which talks about how we will rise up on wings like eagles and run and not grow weary, and not walk and not faint. But there's so much more to this passage that we're going to be kind of digging into today in regards to what was happening in Israel during this time. So first, we're going to throw up just like a brief timeline of what was happening during the phase that we're going to be looking at, and who were the people that were being talked to, what had they kind of gone through, and who was receiving this message when it was initially given. So I have up on here just kind of like a brief timeline overview of what's going on in Judah during that time, because Isaiah was actually a prophet in Judah, not in Israel. Israel was the kingdom to the north, so this was after the tribes of Israel had split. Judah was in the south, Israel was in the north. And Isaiah was also a contemporary of the prophets Hosea and Micah. So Hosea was, and Micah were both kind of the people. Micah was in Judah, but he was right near the border. And so he saw a lot of things happening in both Israel and Judah during the time. And then Hosea, as many of you remember, he was the prophet who married a prostitute, and basically was given the command to show God's love through continuing to take her back and showing his grace and mercy through that season. But Isaiah was probably more well off. He was probably a more wealthy prophet. He had more political standing. He consistently spoke directly to the kings of Judah during this time. So on the top, you can see that there was Assyria that was consistently coming and attacking Judah and Israel, and they were under oppression. So there were a variety of kings. You have Uzziah and Jotham. Uzziah was actually mostly a good king, but towards the end of his life, his pride and just his feelings of being the best, he actually ended up dying due to leprosy. He was struck down with leprosy as a curse from God because of his behavior towards the end of his life. And King Jotham was also a godly king. So as many of you probably know, during the cycles and the ebbs and the flows of Israel and Judah, there were some good kings and there were some bad kings. So Uzziah was mostly a good king, but except for towards the end, Jotham was a godly king. And then we have King Ahaz, who was Hezekiah's father. And he was a very wicked king. So he would give child sacrifices. I think he actually sacrificed one of his children in order to gain pagan favor. And then also, he actually invited the king of Assyria when they were going to come and invade Judah. He actually redirected them towards Israel and said, hey, we will be a vassal kingdom for you, but just don't destroy us. We will continue to, give you tribute. We want you to protect us. We will, technically, you will be in charge of us, but, just keep us intact. But hey, did you see these Israel guys up north? And actually directed the military of Assyria to go and destroy the nation of Israel. And then they were taken into captivity. And so Judah was kind of sitting on its own. Israel had been destroyed. And then King Hezekiah comes into power. And King Hezekiah is also, as we know from the Bible, he also was a godly king as well. And during his reign, he actually served for quite a while. And then there were multiple different Assyrian impacts coming for him as well. And one of the most interesting was actually the Sennacherib. He was an Assyrian king that came. And when he actually laid siege to Jerusalem, he was going to destroy the city. And King Hezekiah was praying. And Isaiah told him, hold out. God's actually going to deliver you. And so he got the people to hold out. He kept them doing what they needed to do and praying. And God actually, the angel of the Lord came and actually destroyed 180,000 soldiers of that king. And so their military might was defeated and they disappeared and they fell off. And so they rescued Judah. And to me, when I was going through it, I was like, that's not a story that I've heard really before. I don't know if you guys... That one has really hit you, but that one was a new one to me. It's like I don't remember hearing the story of the angel of the Lord going and destroying, 200,000 soldiers from the Assyrian army before. But that was kind of the political statement and standing that Isaiah was in during the time when he was writing chapter 40 of Isaiah. So this was about 10 or 11 years after chapter 30, and chapter 30 is where it ends with the siege. And there's been a time, basically, of rest at this point. So first there had been siege and upheaval. The neighboring countries had been invaded. And there had been external conflict as well as internal conflict with moral and religious expectations being in upheaval. A few years prior, you'd had this king who was very oriented around idolatry and paganism, and then it had switched to Hezekiah coming in, and he was a godly king, and he wanted the people to worship the one true God, and there was just a lot of back and forth and a lot of things happening. And during the time when Isaiah 40 was written, it was a relatively easy time of peace, and Hezekiah had also done a lot in regards to rebuilding the infrastructure of the city. So for all intents and purposes, things were quite well at this time. And it's also very likely that the king had the trust of the people. having encouraged them to trust in God when the Assyrians invaded, and then having their trust be rewarded against natural odds. So this put the people in an interesting place where there was no immediate threat, but they also had very high expectations of God's deliverance. So when you look at Isaiah 40 and the remaining verses in Isaiah, what's really interesting is that even though it's very encouraging, it's a prophecy about deliverance from a threat that isn't actively happening. And I think sometimes when we're in a season where things are really easy and we look at things being, we look around and things are well, we're in a season of rebuilding, we're in a season of excitement, it's easy to forget that things can change and that before we know it, something else can come in and throw things off kilter. And so in the idea of like, what would these people have made of a prophecy for a threat that wasn't actually existing? They're given this prophecy of deliverance from a threat that didn't exist. That means that there would be a new threat coming. And we can kind of want to ignore that sometimes and ignore the fact that this is time to bolster our faith, that in the seasons of calm and in the seasons of what we might consider easiness, that's actually time for us to build up our resources and build up our opportunities to be able to, fill our storehouses, so to speak, our spiritual storehouses, so that we're ready for whatever threat might be on the horizon. One thing that's really interesting about what's happening in the political background with King Hezekiah, I don't know if you guys know the story, that he got very sick. And he prayed to God to make him better. And God actually answered his prayer, moved the sun back 10 spaces, and then promised him 15 more years. And it's during that 15 years that Isaiah writes this story, writes the prophecy about the deliverance. But also during that time, the Babylonians hear about Hezekiah's miraculous recovery. And they actually come and they visit, and Hezekiah shows them in the storehouses all of the riches of Judah. And it's because of this visit that the Babylonians invade 90 years later. And it's this invasion that Isaiah is prophesying deliverance from. The invasion of the Babylonians when they take the rest of Judah away. And that's where we get the stories from about Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And all of those elements of the people of Israel being taken away from their home, it's because of the visit where they see Judah's rich and they have a lot that we can take from them. So I think there's two interesting things. First off, it's this political background that's happening that the average person wouldn't be aware of. And so many times there's things in our lives that are happening in the background that we're not aware of that might be preventable but are going to contribute to stuff that's outside of our control. And we can often feel like when bad things happen that we're being punished or that there's something that we could have done better. But the average person in Israel couldn't have done anything to prevent what Hezekiah's actions brought about. The other thing is sometimes God gives us what we ask for, and it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily something that would bring about some positive items sometimes. There was a time when I prayed some prayers, specifically in college, and God gave me some things that I asked for. And honestly, the answer was a lesson more than it was a gift. It was God saying, you've asked for this. It's not necessarily my will for you, but I'm going to give it to you anyway so that you can learn a lesson. And it's possible that this might have been part of what God was teaching Hezekiah in this moment as well. Galatians 6:7 talks about how you reap what you sow. And Hezekiah's pride in showing off his treasures to Babylon, when he was told of his mistake, his focus was on how it would affect him and not the future generations. So in Isaiah 39, he talks about how he's just relieved that when he's told, this will bring about destruction to your people, But he hears the part how it's not in his lifetime. And he had relief in the fact that the consequences would outlive him. His pride and his focus was about his personal legacy, not necessarily that of how it would affect his future generations or the future kingdom of Judah. It was specifically, thank goodness there will be peace in my lifetime. And again, sometimes we can be focused so much on the consequences that are going to affect us individually that we forget to think about our legacy and the things that we're sowing that are potentially going to come to fruition later. So Babylon invaded Judah about 90 years later, and the deliverance prophecy is about 150 years in the future. In addition to the 150 years prophecy, a lot of scholars have looked at this, and we know that there's a lot of things in here that are also about hope and encouragement for future believers, as well as for Christ's second coming. God's promise of deliverance was given before the people of Judah even knew that they needed it. From their perspective, they had already been delivered as a nation. Despite this, we know from the prophet Micah, who was a contemporary of Isaiah, like I mentioned, that the poorer classes were being treated terribly and were abused by the landowners and the rich during this time. And then regardless of the respite of the political situation, if the regular peasant had heard the words of Isaiah 40, how would they have possibly received them? They were already being oppressed. They were already feeling trapped in their situation. And so potentially this deliverance was about more than just this catastrophe that was going to happen. It was also potentially words of encouragement for the day-to-day life that they were living. Life ebbs and flows, and deliverance comes in layers. It comes in the passing of turmoil, and it comes in the rising and falling of leaders and authorities, and it comes in the hope of the second coming of Jesus Christ. And through all of it, God remains Lord and worthy of our worship and glory. Whether your deliverance is coming through the bad thing that happens that's going to lead to something better, or whether it's coming through slowly, like bits and pieces, where you just see things getting slowly better over time, or it might come in a moment where things change all of a sudden and you're given that second chance, that additional opportunity for everything to be different. When you woke up today and things were so much better than you could have ever imagined. There's a word that was created by J.R.R. Tolkien, and the word is called a Eucatastrophe. A Eucatastrophe is a massive turn in fortune from a seemingly unconquerable situation to an unforeseen victory, usually brought by grace rather than heroic effort. The people of Judah had seen this in the angel of the Lord destroying the armies of the Assyrians and in turn defeating the army that was set to defeat them. Isaiah prophesying about this for when the people of Israel will be delivered from the hands of the Babylonians over 100 years in the future. And obviously the biggest Eucatastrophe that we can think about is Jesus dying on the cross and then coming back to life 3 days later, proclaiming dominion over death. The thing about this phrase and this terminology is that things have to get really bad before they can get really good. A Eucatastrophe is a catastrophe being turned around and something wonderful coming from something terrible. And it's not necessarily that the terrible thing was intended to happen. You know, we think about sin in our lives and in the world. That was never God's plan. God never wanted sin to be part of our existence. But when it was part of our existence, he turned it around and he created a Eucatastrophe in Jesus Christ dying on the cross and rescuing us from the infection of sin. And sin will continue its infection of the earth that started at the fall of humankind. And creation will continue to groan and suffer the pains of childbirth while it waits for Jesus to return. And sometimes things do get worse before they get better. And in that time, our task is to stay faithful. There's a scene in The Two Towers where Samwise Gamgee is trying to look out and bring hope to a situation that seems like it's completely hopeless. And we're actually going to watch the scene here together, and then we'll come back together and chat about it. Only those who live till it's time for Jesus to return are going to know how dark the days are going to get. But we do know it's going to get better. You know, the thing that I love about that scene is, again, the fact that things around them look hopeless. But in that hopelessness, there's faithfulness as well. And there's the ability to find beauty in each other in the moment. And then as Christians, we can find beauty in the fact that we know that God is with us, regardless of how dark the moment is going to be. And some darkness is going to be worldwide, similar to what we've seen with a lot of the things that are happening in other countries, with people being persecuted because of their gender, because of their religion. Some of it is just classism and greed. Then we know that some darkness is national, where we look around and we don't necessarily know, again, what's happening behind the scenes politically. It seems out of our control, but it still directs us effectively, or it still directs us specifically. And some of the darkness is going to affect our communities or our families only, or it might be darkness that you feel that you're fighting alone. But when we look to Isaiah 40, which I'm going to start reading here shortly, we can hold on to the promise that all of this is going to pass. And in the meantime, we'll be comforted and strengthened by God in ways that defy explanation. That he does not forget his people and will endure through the struggles. His ways are higher than our ways, and his knowledge of our struggles is not hidden from him, because he is with us in them. Isaiah 40 starts with, "Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed and that her sin has been paid for. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power, and he rules with a mighty arm. See, his reward is with them, and his recompense accompanies them. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of this world to nothing. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground than he blows on them and they wither, and a whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff. Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, my cause is disregarded by my God? Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength, and they will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will not walk and not be faint." He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Oftentimes we want to focus on the blessings of God, and there's so many blessings to be had. And we get scared when we are confronted with the fact that things aren't always going to be easy, but we've all lived in this world at least a day, so we know that that's just the reality of the situation, is that things on earth aren't easy. And to know that God didn't promise that he would only be with us when things were good. He didn't promise that he would only be with us when things were bad, but that he promised he'd be with us through all of it. And, that's the blessing of the incarnation of Jesus Christ, that he lived it all and that he experienced the human condition, and he knows what we've been through, what we're going through, and what we will go through. And throughout all of it, he's with us. And that even if the only deliverance we're promised is the second coming of Jesus, he's already died on the cross for us and forgiven us of our sins, and everything else is just bonus. And so we're going to go over some reflection questions now together. I always think it's really important for us to have time to talk about these things as a church family, to take a moment and to share our stories, to share where we're at and what we're going through. And we do have that opportunity if you're part of a small group, but also I like to give that opportunity sometimes during the morning message as well, to take some time to reflect on the words that we've just heard while they're fresh in our minds. So we have a couple of guided questions. The first one is, what stage are you in now? Are you in the midst of a trial hoping for deliverance? Are you in the midst of deliverance, experiencing the thankfulness and grace of God? Are you focused on today with little reward or little awareness of the consequences for the future, where you're not thinking about what the consequences might be because you're just focused on getting through the right now? Also, do you have a personal Eucatastrophe story to share? A time when God delivered you out of something that seems so hopeless that the deliverance couldn't have been anything but God, bringing about something beautiful and wonderful and making it look so much better almost because of how dark it was. So we're going to take some time together to chat, and then after a few minutes, probably about 5 minutes or so, then I will come back and pray us out. We're going to pause here for a moment. I'm just going to pray for all of us. And then don't feel like that you have to end this conversation here. You can either hang around for a few minutes after I've said amen, or you can invite someone to lunch and say, hey, let's keep this conversation going. All right. Jesus, we just thank you so much for everything that you've done for us. Thank you that we have the blessing and the knowledge that you are working not just in our lives now, but that you're preparing a future for us in heaven with you. And for anyone who maybe is struggling right now and is feeling like they're in the midst of the darkness, that you, Jesus, that you would just give them some light, that you would bring your Holy Spirit to comfort them, that they would know that you're with them in the midst of whatever they're going through, and that you would give them the strength to persevere, the strength to get rid of the weariness, to be able to move forward in whatever plans that you have for them. God, I just thank you so much for this church. I thank you for everyone who is part of it, whether they're in this room or not, and that you would just bless each and every person, that you would show them mercies and love that they couldn't imagine, and that they would know that it came from you. In your name I pray. Amen.